Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I'm sitting in San Luis Obispo in the town at the tasting room of Dunites Winery with Tyler Eck, the owner and winemaker. Tyler, welcome to Wine Soundtrack, and tell us about Dunites.
Thank you. Yeah, we are a small winery located on the SLO Coast. We don't own any vineyards. My wife and I, Rachel, we both work in the wine industry. I work in a winemaking capacity for a local winery, and she works on the vineyard side as a pest control advisor. Wow. So Dunites was a way that we could come together and have a brand that we could work on as a couple.
Wow, so you don't own any vineyards. Where are you sourcing from?
So all of the vineyards we source from are from the SLO Coast, meaning that the vineyards are located very close to the Pacific Ocean. It's a cool climate. Most of the vineyards are planted at Pinot, Noir, and Chardonnay, but then we also work with quite a bit of Syrah, Grenache, and Albarino.
And your total case production?
About 1,200 cases.
Ooh, little. And where are your wines available? Are they in the market in particular cities or just direct to consumer here in the tasting room?
Yeah, we are available throughout California. We have distributors in both Southern and Northern California, as well as Colorado, Tennessee, the UK, and soon New York and New Jersey.
Wow.
And then we just opened up a tasting room in November, about three months ago.
Wow. So now that we have a little understanding of the winery, I'm wondering, what is your first memory relevant to wine?
Ooh. I think that it would probably be some holidays growing up. My family drank wine. They were not super serious about wine, but my parents would go on vacation up to Santa Barbara wine country or Napa, being in California. And then over, Christmas, Easter, things like that, the families would come together, and I think that my uncle and aunt would often bring multiple bottles of wine and do some kind of vertical of a wine, Santa Rita Hills Pinot from someone like Byron or something like that. Starting pretty early in high school, the kids would also go through and do a little tasting, and holidays meant we got to have a little sip of wine. It was a good thing.
Nice. When you were allowed to actually drink wine or on your own to drink wine, is there a particular wine, one of those aha moments that either set you on the path to do what you're doing today, or maybe just, kind of opened your eyes in a different way to wine?
That would have come much later. I think after even studying wine and being exposed to some really great wines, I think a real aha moment was after working in the wine industry for a couple of years, having, a bottle of Cornas from Klopp that had, 10 to 15 years of age on it at the time. I don't remember exactly. It was at a harvest dinner, and that was the wine that was holy smokes, this is way different than anything else I've ever had, in so much more complex and elegant and just cool, and yeah, we want to make Syrah now.
And you do.
and we do.
And so, if we were to come to your home, what kind of wines would we find in there? What do you and your wife do? Are you collecting wine? Are you just buying wine and drinking it?
We try to collect wine. It's hard. Then we'll have family in town this weekend, and there's no more wine left in the house. So, no, we love really fresh whites. We love Chardonnay, so anywhere from Chablis to the Jura, Macon. We love French Chardonnay. A lot of Loire whites. Definitely, more elegant, crisp, acid-driven white wines. Riesling, sparkling wine. We love Champagne, and then the reds, definitely cooler climate. Rhone reds is the style. So something a little bit fruit forward, but with structure and acid. Wines from Etna, Northern Rhone, some really elegant Grenache as well.
So a nice international smattering of wines in your home when you have wine at home. You said that you had family in town and drank through all your wine. Was there something that drank really well this past week?
Oh, yeah. On Friday was my sister-in-law's birthday, so we had a bottle of Tempier that was very delicious, and we also had a bottle of local Syrah from Piedrasassi, and those wines together were really great. You know, similar kind of fruit profiles in terms of how they showed the fruits, and then they both also have lots of acid and firm tannins, so really delicious wines, both on the young side, but that's okay.
So, do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
No, because I think that what's fun about wine is variety in styles and flavors. So maybe not any one variety gives that on its own for the whole wine world. Chardonnay or Riesling are pretty darn close to being perfect, in that they can be made in a lot of different styles and show themselves well and differently around the world. But we want to drink a bunch of different stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, as one way, the people are guided in how to know what to drink. They follow wine critics and scores. And I'm curious what your opinion is on wine critics and scores.
Yeah, we submit our wines for review for pretty much most of the major publications or reviewers around here, and I think it is really fun exercise to, especially if someone's doing a regional report, to have our wines in the mix there and see how they show and what's written about them and what a certain critic might think of the overall region. So it is really fun, but then we also don't really advertise our scores much either. So I don't know. I think we use it for our own personal satisfaction or disgruntlement, and then
Of course.
and then it's really great for some of our trade partners. I think that if a critic who's well regarded writes a positive note or gives a decent score, it helps as a young brand to give some validation to the people that are selling our wines.
So for somebody who hasn't had the pleasure to taste your wines yet, what do you think they're missing out on?
What our wines are missing out on, or the critics? No, I'm kidding.
The consumer.
I think that being focused as a young, small brand on the SLO Coast, we've been able to have access to new vineyards that have not been in the general conversation for long, because they're not that old of vineyards, or they were previously only going to an estate program, and now the owners are selling some grapes. And we're talking about small vineyards in really unique sites. So I think that in general, the consumer has a lot to explore on the SLO Coast, and then our wines give their own little personality and voice to this region.
So as a wine drinker, red, white, or rosé?
Ooh, I'd only one? I'd probably go white. We really like white wine.
Still or sparkling?
These are getting into nitty-gritty details. If I can only have one wine, it would probably be sparkling. Yeah, but...
But if everything was equal, you'd do all of the above.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Many times over.
So, you're drinking a lot of white wine. You love all the different wines. And then I'm assuming you like food as well. And I'm curious how you approach food and wine pairing. Do you think that there are rules to follow? Are there rigid rules? Is it really flexible? Is it a come what may, the bottle's open, let's see what happens?
Somewhat both. We do cook a lot at home, although I'm certainly not a chef, or a sommelier. So it often tends to be that the flavors that we like in food match the flavors that we like in wine. Some amount of acid, some amount of freshness, nothing that's going to be too overbearing. So that kind of, I think we just simplify it for ourselves to make up for the fact that we're not chefs and sommeliers.
But it works, right?
It works. It tastes pretty good at home. I'm a fan of it.
So, Space Aliens were to walk in your front door here at your tasting room. Which of your wines would you want to welcome them with? To introduce Dunites Wine?
We've talked so much about Syrah, so I think we'd go with Syrah. I think that we work with some vineyards that are extremely close to the Pacific, 1.5 to 2 miles away, and it's definitely a cool climate site. So yeah, let's give the aliens some cool climate California Syrah and see what they make of it.
Now, you said that you don't own any vineyards, but you're working with multiple vineyards, and you're in this area. We know that vintages tell a story. Every vintage is different. But do you see variation from vintage to vintage, or are you seeing it more through each of the vineyards that you work with?
We definitely have vintage variation here. Even though California and coastal California is a very mild climate, we won't see some of the major dramatic effects that I think more extreme climates and northern latitudes would have. We definitely have had, especially over the last 10 years, a lot of drought years. We've had numerous wildfire years, and then kind of the worst is heat waves. So we see climate differently in terms of the weather that's impacting our harvest decisions and that kind of last stage of fruit ripening. So for us, we are trying to be nimble during harvest and be able to get stuff if we see heat on the forecast. Rain is not really an issue. Hail is not really an issue. But yeah, heat waves are our major concern during harvest.
Are there any signs or predictors that you look for that'll help you kind of assess what to expect in a vintage?
It's really hard just because we could have the perfect growing season. We could have full soil profile of water, really nice, even cool summer, which is kind of the ideal for us. Lots of fog, lots of cool nights and mild days, and everything will look really great. And then there are years like 2018 where that weather holds through the whole harvest and there's no pressure, and we, as winemakers at least, there's not much pressure from us for our picking decision, and it allows us to pick when we want and to play with different styles and really make the wines that we see fit. And then there are vintages like 2020 when things looked okay, and then we had the worst wildfire heat disaster the state's probably ever seen, and there's really not much you can do and plan for in that scenario.
No. Absolutely. So do you spend a lot of time in the vineyards you work with?
Yes. Yeah. Not owning or working the vineyards ourselves, it is important for us to have as much experience with them as possible. So a lot of the vineyards that we work with are owned or farmed by our really good friends. So that means that we just always have that contact with what's going on, even if we're not getting in there, and we don't try to get in there and tell our friends how to do their jobs or the vineyard managers how to do their jobs. But it allows us to have access to know kind of what they're thinking and what they're experiencing throughout the year, when we have them over for dinner, or when we go for a bike ride, or when we go and meet them in the vineyard and walk around. So we do try to stay as close as possible. And then Rachel obviously has the vineyard management, viticulture background. So walking through the vineyards with her is really important to me because she sees things in a very different way than I do as kind of a winemaker, more leaning in my training. It's really insightful.
So she teaches you things in the vineyard, and I'm curious, does she have a tendency to talk to the grapes, or has she taught you how to communicate with the grapes?
No, I can't say she has.
What about when the wine is in a barrel? Do you then have any communication with it? Do you ever talk or sing to your grapes or wine?
No, I don't think so.
Take a more scientific approach?
Yeah, I guess we go with the flow a little bit, but we don't really personify the wine barrels themselves.
And, as a small winery, and it's you and your wife, have you guys established any sort of traditions or good luck rituals to start out harvest?
I wish I could say yes, but the reality is that we both work, so we're already kind of in harvest when we start, and then it's, we picked grapes today, like, let's open a bottle of champagne with dinner, and
Not a lot of preparation for this stuff.
We're working. It's tough. It's still a side gig, so we take our victories when we can, though.
Nice. When you were a little boy, what did you want to be when you grew up?
That's a good question. My dad was a carpenter. I got zero of his carpentry skills, but he built up a little factory that doing some kind of wood manufacturing stuff. So I definitely thought that I would go to college and learn business and be able to help him in some capacity that way. Then after my freshman year in college, he sold his business, so
that was the end of that.
It wasn't his plan.
And when you're not working, although it sounds like you work a lot, but when you're not working, how do you like to spend your free time?
Well, we live on the SLO Coast. It's a beautiful place. We have gorgeous beaches, so we like to go down to the beaches, go surfing, go ride bikes. It's kind of a paradise. We have mountain bike trails that we can access from our house, and we have the beach right there that we can walk down to. So yeah, a perfect day. We'd be doing some combination of that, eating some good food, drinking some good wine. Yeah.
On that note, to make that perfect day, that romantic evening, what are the wines that would be opened in your house for you and your wife to set the mood?
I think we'd be starting with champagne, for sure. And then, if there's only two of us, we should probably be responsible and only open two bottles. But we're not driving, and we could always finish bottles later in a couple of days. So, a little bit of champagne, some kind of really great Chablis, or we've also like a few producers in the Jura for their Chardonnays. So something that's going to maybe just have ripping acidity and some kind of complexity in the Chardonnay. And then, a nice bottle of Cornas would be a really great evening.
When you think about your career and, or even your whole life, from when we're little children, people give us advice. Our parents give us advice, our teachers and our mentors. Is there a piece of advice somebody gave you that you carry with you and apply either to life or how you work?
I think that good advice, and it's probably been a few people who have given some amount of this over the years, more than any one person, but it's to not worry too much about things that we can't control or things that other people are going to say or like or dislike. And when you come into the wine industry and you start making a little bit of wine and trying to sell it, you got to have pretty alligator skin, because not everyone's going to be into it, and some people aren't afraid to tell you. So you just got to, have thick skin and not let those kinds of opinions or things that are out of our control wear us down.
Well, I like what I'm sipping, so.
Good. I'm glad to hear it.
When you look back at your career, you have a long career ahead of you. You're still young and you've accomplished a lot, but you have a long way to go. But when you look back, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements so far?
So we served our wines at our wedding, and that was, I guess, 3.5 years or so after we started Dunites. So being able to have, whites and reds and serve our wines at our wedding, I thought that was really special that Rachel and I were able to have this thing and share it with our friends and family, just because that's really what wine is about in its essence, I think, to us in a lot of ways. We can get more philosophical on stuff, but in the end, we want to share it with those close to us, and that was really great.
Well, speaking of sharing, we're sitting at a table here, and there's an empty chair next to you, and I'm wondering if you could share a bottle of your wine with any person, living or deceased, from any walk of life. Who would you want to be drinking Dunites with?
It would be my dad.
Yeah?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he passed a few years ago, so it would be fun to have him here.
Oh, that's beautiful. I got a question for you, a real quick answer. A table without wine is like?
It's like a dance without music.
Oh, that's good. And you weren't even prepared for that. So, If you could give our listeners a piece of advice about wine, what would you want to share with them?
To trust your instincts and keep exploring. I think that across the world right now, there is so much really great wine being produced, and sometimes we get exposed to wines from places that being some dumb California kid, I would never have thought they made wine, and they've probably got thousands of years history. But just incredible stuff being made around the world, and there's a lot of attention given to the blue chip wines and regions, and to go outside of that is really fun.
Well, I'm curious, what wine region in the world is at the top of your bucket list to explore?
That's a good question. I have to think about that one really quick.
We can come back to that, and I can jump to our little game of wine and music, and then
Sure.
think about that. Well, because we're almost at the end here, and of course, Wine Soundtrack, we love to play a little game talking about wine and music and how they pair together, because that's what a lot of people think of. So if we look at the wines that you have, tell me kind of like what music they make you think of or you want to listen to. So we're starting with your sparkling wine. Is this your SLO Coast Pet Nat?
Yes, this is a Pet Nat that we just released this week. It's Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, so it's kind of like a traditional Champenoise style blend, but obviously made in a very different style. So I guess, it's Pet Nat. It's kind of a hipster kind of thing, so I guess we would go for something a little bit more like contemporary and modern and fun, upbeat music.
Nice.
Yeah.
And what about your rosé of Pinot Noir?
Rosés, obviously, think of summertime, sunshine, maybe something during the day. I would go for, pool party music, something like some reggae at a pool party.
And now you mentioned that one of the wines you fell in love with was Syrah, and you're making Syrah. So your SLO Coast Syrah, which has no added sulfites, native yeast, unfined and unfiltered.
Yeah, I know. You put it that way, and it sounds a little raw, but it holds some elegance to it. So I think something maybe a little bit more rock, but like something that's not totally off the wall, like Black Keys or something that's fun and exciting, but not so edgy that it's going to be off-putting to too many people.
And last but not least, let's go with your Grenache, because, got to round it out with another red here. And, tell me about the Grenache and what wine, what music.
It's a fun wine. It's a little bit, it's brightly fruited. It's kind of, I'd say, more classically styled. So something, we're talking about our music tastes, which is very heavy into like the rock reggae kind of world. So I would go maybe for something of my wife's choosing and lean a little bit more into like some soul and R&B, like from the 80s, the Islay Brothers or something like that.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question then. This may not be so far off from what makes for a romantic evening, but if you were going off to a deserted island, what 3 wines would you take with you?
Oh, same thing that we would have.
For a romantic evening. Champagne, Chablis,
and Grenache. Yeah.
Pretty easy. It's romantic or it's isolation, either way.
It's kind of the same thing, right?
Okay, so now you got to tell me, what wine region is at the top of your bucket list? Or maybe somewhere at the top.
Yeah, I've never been to the Atlantic coast of Spain. So I think going and checking out some of those more coastal northern Spain areas would be really cool and really interesting, especially around like the food and the tapas and the vermouth and all the other really cool like regional things in that area. That would be really fun.
Well, Tyler, you've survived. You made it through. You did it. I have my one last final question for you, which is, if people listening want to come find you, how can they find you and taste your wines?
Yeah, we have our tasting room here in downtown San Luis Obispo. You can find us on our website at DunitesWineCo.com and Instagram. People can follow us and stay in touch, and we'd be happy to share our wines with them.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us on Wine Soundtrack. You've been great, and cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.